Greetings to all of you and a hearty welcome to day 8 and the final day of our session on Java-based microservices. In fact, we have started our journey on microservices 8 days back and we have covered many topics under microservices. In fact, past 3 days we are looking at some advanced topics under microservices. If you recollect, under the advanced topic discussion, we have already covered distributed log tracing with Sleuth and Zipkin. And we have also covered cross-origin resource sharing, that is CORS. That is what we have discussed yesterday, right? So today, the first module that I will be introducing you to is how you can set up OAuth security for your Spring Boot apps. It might not be specific to a microservice per se. The OAuth security settings is general for any Spring Boot app. And since microservices are nothing but they are Spring Boot apps, it is valid here as well, right? So we will see how you can set up OAuth security for your Spring Boot apps. Yeah. And once I complete that, if time permits, let me see, I can complete the fourth module. Fourth module is a conceptual module. There are some kind of settings and configuration that I have to show you. So let's see. I will talk about the fourth module depending on how much of time we have. Yeah. But the main module to discuss today is this module on setting up OAuth security for Spring Boot apps. Yeah. Before I proceed with the discussion of OAuth security and how you can implement it, please note this is going to be a very niche topic. This is also, the implementation also will involve lot of steps. Yeah. I want all of you to be very, very attentive when we are discussing about this module. Okay. But before that, a round of applause to 3 people in our team: Shubhadeep, Shrikant Reddy, and Ankit Kumar. These 3 people have already submitted the hands-on assignment solution on microservices. That's very commendable. I'm yet to review them, but I would want to applaud and appreciate you guys. Because like you are kind of role models for others who are yet to do that. Yeah. So because tomorrow onwards we will be going ahead with Angular training. When we start with Angular, you will also have to do Angular based hands-on, etc. So it's always better that you complete all your pending tasks before you move on to Angular. So again, appreciation to Shubhadeep and Shrikant and Ankit. Yep. So with that, I think we are ready to move on to the first module for today. So are you all ready with your utmost attention for this chapter, please, all of you? Yes, great. So in this module, I'll be showing you how you can set up OAuth security for your Spring Boot apps. Let me introduce you to the objectives of this module. Yeah. First and foremost, we will talk about what is OAuth and how does it work. Whenever we need to implement OAuth or for our apps, we need to be aware that in an OAuth framework, there are 2 important components that are involved. One is called as an authorization server. You have the second one called as resource server. Both these authorization server and resource server together will help me in generating and validating something called as a token, which is usually called as a JWT token. So before we look at implementation steps, we will have to understand what do you mean by authorization server? What is the role that is played by authorization server? Second, what is a resource server and what is the role that is played by resource server? Then, as I told you, both of them get involved in generating and validating tokens, which is nothing but JWT tokens. Yeah. So we'll look at that. And once we are comfortable, we can look at step-by-step that we need to follow to implement OAuth-based security for our Spring Boot app. So these are the objectives that we will try to cover. So first, let me introduce you to what is OAuth. Many a times, I'm sure like nowadays, assume you are trying to register for a new app, right? Or a new mobile app or a new web portal. Instead of providing you their own login and authentication mechanisms, have you seen scenarios where they say, if you already have a Facebook account or if you already have a LinkedIn account uh, or any different account like that, you can log in with the same credentials. Have you come across things like that? Yes, right. So what essentially your app is doing is, it is receiving your credentials. It is not validating or authenticating. It is passing that to a third party. The third party will validate. In our case, the third party is the LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. That will automatically validate your credentials. And if Facebook or LinkedIn says, yes, this person is a valid user, the app allows you to get in, right? So here you can see OAuth is in play. So what does OAuth do? Let's have a look at this. OAuth 2, in fact, OAuth 2 is the second version of OAuth and the latest versions. So whenever we are using OAuth or OAuth 2, both of them are one and the same. Yeah. In fact, there was an older version called OAuth 1. The second version, which is very widely used at present, is OAuth 2. So what is OAuth 2? OAuth 2 is nothing but it's an authorization framework. This authorization framework internally contains a lot of components. With the help of the internal components, this authorization framework enables application web security. So if you are creating a web application and you want to apply some kind of security and authentication, token-based authentication to your app, all the components of this authorization framework called OAuth 2 can help us do that. Yeah. So OAuth 2 is an authorization framework that enables the application web security to access the resources from the client. So assume there are some resources. In our example, maybe you have created a REST controller. In the REST controller, I have a resource and I want to access that resource. So the client wants to access that resource. But using OAuth, you can guard that resource until the user provides valid credentials and until the client provides the valid token. Your OAuth system will not allow you to access that particular resource. That's the whole idea. Yeah. So to build a OAuth application, there are OAuth application to allow the client to access a particular resource. There are three internal things that are involved. One is, of course, you should have a client ID and a client secret. Client secret is nothing but a password. So you have client ID and client secret. Plus you will also have something called as grant type, which is nothing but the authorization code. Yeah. So before I take you through the actual discussion on what is authorization server, what is resource server, what is this JWT token, etc., let me give you a real life example just to understand the context. Yeah. Very similar to what happens in real world. Yeah. Whatever story I'm going to tell you is a fake story, but I want you to just visualize and remember it. Yeah. Now, assume I have a account in a bank. Okay. So yes, like any other citizen, I also have an account in a bank. And apart from having an account in the bank, I also have opted for a locker facility from the bank. Are you all with me? Yeah. So I am a bank's customer. Apart from being a regular account customer, I have also opted for a locker facility so that I can keep all my valuable things and my valuable documents in the locker. Okay. So this is what is there. Now, usually how I operate is whenever I want to use my locker, either for retrieving something or keeping something, I go to the bank and I tell the teller or the person there, telling I want to operate my locker. So they check my credentials, whether I am a valid user and stuff like that. Post that, they will guide me to the locker room. In the locker room, there will be my locker, but the locker can be opened using two keys. One is a private key that I have with me. One is the public key which the bank has. Only when both the keys are used, I will be able to open the locker. Yeah. So now I anyway have my private key, right? So I will go to the bank with my private key. I will open the locker, but the locker does not get opened until the second step also happens. Second step is the bank employee opens the locker with the public key. So once I open, I will be able to operate with my locker. And when I come back also, I will lock with my private key. And the bank employee also locks it with the public key. And finally, I'm able to come home. Are you all able to visualize this, guys? Yes, right? Now the idea is, assume I'm traveling. Yeah, even for my training, of course, now due to pandemic, we don't travel much. But in regular cases, me as a trainer, I used to travel very often to all the other cities of India and abroad. So assume in one such training, I am abroad, okay, or I am in a different city than Bangalore, and I want to very immediately operate uh, on my bank and the locker system. Yeah. So what I do is I authorize my dad to operate on my behalf. Yeah, I authorize my dad on my behalf. So I call the bank manager and I speak to him that I am in travel. I will be sending across my dad, and my dad will, I will also send an authorization letter to my dad telling I'm authorizing him to operate on my behalf. Anyway, the private key is at home. My dad can pick it up. And so what my dad does is he takes the private key with him. He also takes my authorization letter and his ID, whatever, and then he goes to the bank. So the bank checks, right? Okay, the authorization letter has been given by Savita, who is their customer, and my dad's credentials, his ID proof, etc. Then whether he has the key, and once they allow, my dad can go and operate on that locker on my behalf. Same funda happens, private key, public key, and all that comes back. Are you all with me, guys? Yeah. So here, okay, here, please remember, there are few parties to identify. One party is the user. User is me, the original account holder. So user is me. I will have a user ID and a password, right? So that is a user. My dad, who is acting on my behalf, is the client. Yeah. So my dad, who is acting on my behalf, is the client. So the client also will have a client ID and a client secret. Client secret is nothing but a password. Yeah. So client ID and client secret. So my dad also is going to have client ID and client secret. Plus, I would have given an authorization code. Yeah. So for example, in the letter, I will tell whether my dad, what kind of operation he can do. Yeah. He can only probably, I have sent my dad to pull out something from there. So maybe I have not allowed him to keep something there. So I am authorizing him only to pull out something from the locker. So that is nothing but the kind of authorization I've given. So, and my dad is also carrying my authorization letter where I've authorized him to do this task. Only when he presents all these things to the bank being the main authorization framework, it will authorize, it will look at my credentials, then it validates it. And once it validates, I'll be able to operate on my dad, in fact, will be able to operate on the locker, isn't it? Yeah. So here I want you to remember who is a user, who is a client, and who is the authorization person. Authorization person is, in my case, the bank. Team, are you all with me? Remember this, it will be easy for you to understand as and when we move forward. Yeah. So as I've been telling, when you look at OAuth as a framework, it is internally made up of two important components. One is called as the authorization server. The other one is called as the resource server. Authorizations, both of them have their own roles to play. Both of them almost every time go hand in hand as well. Yeah. But what is the role of an authorization server and what does a resource server do? Have a look. Authorization server is a supreme architectural component for the web API security. So the authorization server acts as a centralized authorization point that allows your apps and your HTTP endpoints to identify the features of your application. So this authorization server is very similar to the bank manager. So resource server and authorization server is very similar to the bank. Authorization server is the supreme architectural component, which is the main component for web security. So it acts as a centralized authorization point for our apps. And in case I have any HTTP endpoints, which is providing you some feature, it will identify what features are available, how is it secured and all that. So that is the authorization server. Yeah. Now what is a resource server? Resource server is an application that provides the access token to the clients to access the resource server endpoints. So assume in my REST controller, I have some endpoints. The client is planning to access that endpoint. Resource server's job is to provide the access token to the clients so that they can access that resource endpoint. So internally, resource server is a collection of libraries. It contains the details of your endpoints, what are your resources, and all the detail resource server will have. But when we look at the roles, it looks as though the roles are interlapped, right? But there is a slight difference. What does the authorization server do? And what does this resource server do? Slight difference is there. Look at this underlined point here. Authorization server will generate the token. So it will have the tokens generated and the resource server will validate those tokens. So for example, when my dad goes to the bank, he first meets the manager. He shows his credentials, he shows my letter that I've sent, all that. So the manager is what will generate a token. So he will say, okay, he will check all that and he says, okay, you can go ahead and do your operation. Now, after the manager approves, my dad goes and meets a clerk who is in charge of that locker system. So the clerk, what does he do? Clerk will recheck whether the manager has approved it. And after that, then he allows me to perform, right? So resource server is a person who kind of validates it. Yeah. So authorization server will have the tokens generated and the resource server will validate those tokens. And in our case, okay, if my dad has to operate, he first has to go to the authorization server. He have to query the authorization server, get the token, and after that he has to query and talk to the resource server. The resource server will actually validate the token. Guys, are you all able to understand? See, my idea to use a similar real world example is to make understanding much more easier. But that does not mean that in the interview questions, if somebody asks what is an authorization server, you will say authorization server is like a bank manager. Of course, you can use that as an example, but please remember the roles played by authorization server and the resource server. Yeah. So in a typical OAuth, who will generate the token, guys? Which component will generate the token? Correct, authorization server, right? Narayan Swami Gutta, I am not asking what is the token. I am asking who generates the token. Yeah. The authorization server generates the token and who validates the token? Correct. The resource server will validate the token and the token itself is called as a JWT token. Yeah. So the next important thing is JWT token. So we are saying a token, right? Token is generated, token is validated. So what is this token? The token which is very widely used, there are many varieties of tokens, but usually the wide variety of token that is used is called JWT token. JWT stands for JSON Web Token. It is an open source industry standard mechanism for representing claims securely between two parties. So here two parties are involved, right? My dad who is representing me plus the bank. So the token represents the claim securely between two parties. Yeah, that is me and my dad, which will be validated by my bank. Yeah. So JWT, which is JSON Web Token, internally, the token will be in a JSON format. This token is also called as JWT OAuth bearer token. Bearer means whoever holds it. So whoever holds that token is authorized to perform that task. Yeah. So JWTs can be used as a OAuth bearer token, and the token will encode all the relevant information that might be needed for somebody to validate and allow me access or not. So inside the token, it will have all the relevant parts. The token will not depend on any other external storage or external database. Token itself will be a full-fledged ready to use token. So it will encode all relevant parts of your access token into the token itself. So if somebody wants to validate, all the details that they need will be available in that token. Yeah. Of course, if you want to know how the JWT token works, what are its internal content, if you want to know in detail, you can visit the JWT's official website called jwt.io. You will get more data. But for now, no need to worry too much. Please remember that the token that is generated by OAuth is a JWT token, and this token will contain and encode all the information that is required for representing a claim. Okay, so that's all you need to know. Is that okay, guys? Yes. Now that we have understood the whole entire exercise, what we will do is we will slowly start implementing our program, where we will use and we will set up an authorization server, resource server. We'll create our REST controller, which will provide a resource, and we will also have to do a lot of configurations so that our resource is secured by OAuth, and only when somebody provides appropriate credentials plus the token, only then somebody will be allowed to access that resource. That is what we are planning to do, right? So to create a typical OAuth based app, so in our Spring Boot app, of course, it's a typical Spring Boot app. In our Spring Boot app, we will have to add certain dependencies. These are the dependencies that will be required for our app. Yeah, I will show it to you. Don't worry. So in our pom.xml file, we will have to add the dependency for Spring Security. So Spring Security is highly customizable authentication and access control framework for your Spring application. So all the others depend on the base Spring Security features. So first you have to add the Spring Security related dependency. This will provide authentication and access control framework for your Spring application. Plus, we are planning to use OAuth, which is very much part of Spring Security or Spring Security. So we will have to add the dependency for Spring Security OAuth 2. So this will implement the OAuth 2 structure. And once you add this dependency, you will be able to enable and work with authorization server and resource server. So this dependency will enable authorization server and resource server. Plus the authorization server and resource server will be working with token, right? They have to generate a token, they have to validate a token. So to work with tokens, I will have to add a dependency for Spring Security JWT. So this will generate the JWT token for your web security. So this will be generated by your auth server and will be validated by your resource server. Yeah. Plus in my example, assume the bank. Yeah, bank is keeping track of all its valid customers. Yeah, so just to simulate, it was not required, but just to simulate in production environments also, bank will have data of customers in a database, right? So they might have to read data from there, right? So for that, I will have H2 database. H2 database will store the user information for authentication and authorization. So when I say user information, who is a user in my example? It is me or my dad? Who is the user in this example or that bank example that I gave you? Correct, me, right? I am the customer of the bank. So user is me. So H2 database is used to keep track of the user information. Plus to talk to H2 database from Spring Boot app, I'm going to use regular JDBC style. So I'm going to add a JDBC starter. This will help me to access the database to ensure that user is present or not. So I will be accessing the database, running a select statement, trying to retrieve the user based on the user ID, all that I will do. So for that, I'm using regular JDBC style. So I'll be using JDBC template, and using that, I'll be able to retrieve the data. And of course, in my app, I'm going to create a REST controller. The REST controller will support one endpoint, one very simple get endpoint. So to create my REST endpoints, I will also require Spring Boot Starter Web. Team, are you all with me? Yeah, all these dependencies are required. So when I create a Spring Boot app, I will add all these dependencies. And once all these dependencies are there, we can then start with our coding one by one. Yeah. So let's look at the app, and then I will show you the next step. Yeah. So you can see that this is the app that I've created called Spring Security App. And in the security app, let's look at the pom.xml. Have a look. Can you look at this program and tell me which version of Spring Boot am I using in my app right now? When somebody asks you, some data you guys will look at and tell me, some wrong answers you will give me. Yeah, this is the last day of our microservices training. And one simple question I ask you, the first three answers are wrong answers. Yeah, I am asking you which version of Spring Boot am I using in this? And you guys are telling 4. Is this what we have learned? Yeah, then what is this? I'll really get wild if you guys give me some basically silly and wrong answers, guys. Not after 5 days of Spring Boot training, 8 days of microservices training. Every program we have seen the pom.xml, but still you guys give me the wrong answer. People who have given me the wrong answer. Again, I'm asking you, are you able to make out which is the version of Spring Boot I'm using? And one person says one answer, another person also, without even thinking, give the same answer. Are you all comfortable? Are you all able to understand which version of Spring Boot am I using? Yes, right? Then let me scroll. Which version of Java am I using? 1.8. Yeah. Now, are you all comfortable with the basic dependencies here? One is Spring Boot Starter Security, which is the main Spring Security dependency. Plus, because I'm working with a database, I'm working with a database called H2. So I have dependency that I've added for H2. To work with any database, I'm using JDBC style. So there is a Spring Boot starter for JDBC that I've added. Plus, I'm also going to create my REST endpoints. So for that, I'm going to have my Spring Boot starter web. I am going to use OAuth. So I have a dependency that I've added for Spring Security OAuth. Look at the group ID, please. org Spring Framework Security.auth. Under that, the artifact ID is Spring Security OAuth. I also will require dependency for JWT token creation. So I have to add the dependency for Spring Security JWT. Yeah, which is very much part of security. Yeah, this one. And of course, test, I did not expect. I did not add manually, but test related dependencies are also available. Okay, test for regular Spring Boot test, test dependencies for security related tests. So both those are available. Yeah. And of course, not to worry, my regular Spring Boot Maven plugin. Are you all with me, guys? Yeah. Now, once this is ready, we are next ready to look at our code bit by bit. Yeah. To help you understand that better, there are certain steps that we'll be following. Yeah, as I told you, the implementation steps looks lengthy, but they're all easy. It looks lengthy, that's it. Okay, but I want you to be very attentive. What is step number 1 that I'm going to perform in terms of implementation? First and foremost, we will configure and we will create our main runnable class. The main runnable class is our Spring Security app .java. In this Spring Boot app, we have added 2 additional annotations. Of course, at the rate enable, at the rate Spring Boot application will be automatically there. Yeah. Apart from that, I will also use 2 additional annotations. At the rate enable authorization server, at the rate enable resource server. As the name itself suggests, both these annotations get added to the app so that your app acts both as a authorization server and resource server. Guys, are you all with me? Yeah. You can have both these as 2 different classes also. But anyway, they have different roles, but they work hand in hand, right? One is going to generate the token, the other one is going to validate the token. So my app is going to behave both as an authorization server and the resource server. So I will just add these 2 annotations onto my class. Yeah. Plus, I could have created a separate REST controller class, but just to keep it simple, in the same application class itself, I have also used @REST controller, and I have implemented one endpoint called movie. So whenever we receive a GET request on movie endpoint, it has to return a movie name. That's all I have done. Yeah. So let me show you this. Okay. So here is my class Spring Security app application.java. Yeah. So whatever we have discussed in the slide, look at this, please. Go through the code, all of you. Are you all comfortable with the annotations from line number 10 to line number 13? Yes, right? Especially line number 11 and 12 are new, isn't it? Yeah. Enable authorization server and enable resource server. And this is our, I'm also using this as my REST controller also. This is my main runnable application class. In public static void main, I am bootstrapping or I'm launching my app. Apart from that, since the same app is going to act as a REST controller, you can see here that using @request mapping, I've said whenever we receive a request on /movie, this method gets called. And what is this movie returning? It is returning a movie name. Yeah. So I'm returning this movie name, Top Gun Maverick. Guys, are you all with me? Yeah. Very easy, right? This is my main application. And the client is trying to access this resource. But whenever the client accesses this resource, I am not going to allow that person to access it as it is. I will check the client ID. I will check the client secret. I will also check whether the guy has a bearer token, whether the bearer token is valid, and only after all the checking, I will allow that person to access it. Does it make sense, guys? That's what we are setting up, right? So now once this is ready, let's look at the next step. Next step is, since we are going to check the authentication of the user whenever they access the resource. So in our case, the resource is /movie. So whenever a client accesses that, either through the browser or maybe through the client like Postman or ARC or whatever, we will require or we will have to check for the authentication of the user, right? So to store the authentication or to store the details of a user, we will have a POJO class. So you can call it any name. I'm just calling it as user model.java. In user model.java, I will store the user information that will be used for authentication. So basically, basic authentication requires two things. One is the username and the password. Along with that, what is your permission or what is your role? Yeah. See, there are two things whenever we talk about authentication. Who are you and what you can do? That these are the two bigger parts. So who are you can be represented by saying your username and password. So people will be able to understand who you are. And your granted authorities or the granted authority will tell what authority do you have. Can you perform this task or can you be allowed to do this task? That is decided by the granted authority. So since we are going to check for authentication of the user whenever they access the resource called movie, to represent that we will have the POJO class called user model that will store the user information that will be used for authentication. So you can see this is my POJO called user model. It has three properties. One property is a username, which is a string type. Another property is password, which is again a string type. Plus you also have a collection. So I have an array list. The name of the array list is granted authorities list. And you can see that this list is going to contain objects of type granted authority. So granted authority is a class represented by Spring Security. Granted authority will contain it's an object which represents a role. So based on that role, we can decide what authentication or what authorization you have. Does it make sense, guys? Yep. And of course, regular Java means POJO, right? So for all these properties, I'm going to have getters and setter methods. Yep. So let's look at user model.java, please. So you can see there are a lot of classes. Yeah. But the role of every class is important. Yeah. So application class is ready. Now we will look at our POJO called user model.java. Yeah. Have a look. Is this the class that we discussed in the slide? Yes, right. User property called username, property called password, and the collection of type granted authority. Plus I have appropriate getter and setter methods. Yeah. So just remember, this is my POJO class called user model. Okay. Next. Yes, for representing your user in your app, you are having a model class called user model. I repeat. Yes, for representing a typical user in your app, you are having a POJO class called user model. Yeah, but in Spring Boot authentication or in Spring Boot security authentication, every user who's ready to get authenticated has to be of the type called custom user. Yeah. So though you have created a user model to represent a user, we will then define a custom user class. This custom user class will have to extend from Spring Security supplied class called user class. So Spring Security, through the core user details package, it will provide me a class called user. So we will also have to define a custom user class. This custom user class extends from Spring supplied class called user, and an object of this class is what will be used for Spring Boot authentication. An object of user model cannot be directly used for Spring Boot authentication. An object of user model, we have to somehow wrap it as a custom user type. Custom user type is extending from the user type that is supplied by Spring Security. Finally, this object is what will be used for authentication. So in custom user class, we will get the username, password, and granted authorities list, and we will pass it on to the super class called user. And this is what will be supplied by Spring Security. Yep. So team, are you all with me? I will show you the code, don't worry. Yeah. So let me show you the custom user class now, please. So here I've created one class called custom user. Have a look at the code. Spend a minute on this code, please, all of you. Are you able to make out on line number 5 that I am creating a class called custom user, which extends from user. So user is a built-in user class provided by Spring Security. So anybody who would want to authenticate in a typical Spring Boot app, they have to be of type user. So I am going to create a class called custom user, which extends from user class. And in the constructor of custom user, I will receive a user model object. So user model is my POJO, right? Right? Which has username, password, and granted authorities list. Yeah. So to the constructor of custom user, they will pass, whoever is creating a custom user, they will pass a user model object. From the user model object, we will call the getter method for getting the name. Similarly, I am using user model to get the password. Similarly, I will get the granted authorities list. All these values I will pass to the superclasses constructor. So the superclass constructor for custom user is the constructor of user, right? So whatever is the username of the user model, whatever is the password of the user model, whatever is the granted authorities list, I am going to pass it on to my superclasses constructor, which is user. That is how a user model object will be finally represented as a custom user, which in turn will be wrapped as a user, which is ready to be authenticated. Are you all with me? Yes. Okay. Once this is ready, yeah. Once this is ready, what is the next step? Yeah. Have a look. We will now create a repository class called as OAuth-DAO. This OAuth-DAO, what it will do is it will read the user information from the database. If you recollect, in a typical bank or in any scenario, the user details, whoever are the valid users in your system, I want to keep track of them. So I will have a database where I'm keeping track of all the users. So this OAuth-DAO class will read the user information from the database. If the user is present in the database, it will send it to the custom user service. And it will also add the granted authority as one authority or the role called a system admin. The role called system admin is nothing but a string. It can be anything. But here is where in OAuth-DAO, we will check the database to check whether a particular user is present or not. If the user is present, we will also add a granted authority called as system admin, role called system admin. So that is what we will do in OAuth-DAO. So let's look at OAuth-DAO now. You can see this OAuth-DAO. So first I want you to look at this. Yeah. Go through the code, please. I'm sure you can understand. Yeah. Go through the code and then we'll have a discussion. I'm sure roughly you are able to understand what's happening here. Yeah. Are you able to make out that within this O or DAO, which is represented as your repository, I have auto wired for an object of type JDBC template? Yeah. If at all your intention was to work with your database using a JDBC style, you can opt for a JDBC template class. So I've just auto wired for it. Yeah. You've added the starter module for JDBC. So you will have access to this object. So I've auto wired for JDBC template, right? Once that is ready, look at what you are doing. There is in this class, there is a method called get user details, which is going to receive a username. So this get user details is part of the O or DAO. It is going to receive a username as a string. So for example, in our case, just take an example of a username called Roger. Yeah. So a username called Roger, assume that gets passed to this get user details method. What is it supposed to return? Finally, this is supposed to return a user model object. Yeah. So once the get user details method receives the username, assume for our example it is Roger, what is happening inside? I'm first creating a collection called as an array list called granted authorities list, which is capable of holding granted authority objects, but at present it is empty. Now I'm going to create a string variable to store my SQL query. This is the SQL query that I'm running. Select star from users table. Don't worry, I will show you the schema and the table details later. Assume there is a table available called users. So the SQL query will be select star from users table where username column or username is equal to question mark. So this is the runtime parameter that I'm passing. So I have this SQL query ready. Now using this JDBC template, yeah, using this JDBC template, I call the query method and first argument is your query. So what is the query that you want to execute? User SQL query. That is nothing but this entire query. And the second argument is this is the JDBC style path parameter, right? The parameter that I have to pass as a JDBC style. So what will be the value here? New string of username. So username that is passed is Roger. So that is what I'm passing as the value for this question mark. So idea is it is trying to select all fields from the user table where username is Roger. Yeah. So if it is present, okay, if this is successful, whatever results come up, it is going to be, this is the lambda style, right? So this is going to, whatever output it's going to give me, it's going to be received here as a result set. And in the result set, I'm first creating a user model object, which is empty. Using the user model set username method, I will set the username as whatever is there in username, which is Roger. And using the user model, I'm calling the set password method. How am I going to set the password method? The result set is going to contain all the data. From the result set, using the getString method, I'm going to get the value for the password. That is what I'm setting to this. So username and password has been set. And that is what it's going to return as a user model. Yeah. Once the user model is ready, user model has three things, right? One is username, the other one is password. It also has granted authority list. So, but this will just return the user model. But once the list is ready, yeah, see this entire thing, it will be available as a, it will return this and that will be available in this list. Yeah. Now I'm checking. If list size is greater than 0, in my case, yes, because Roger was a username which was present. So I was able to retrieve the object for Roger, and I've created a user model. I've set the username as Roger. I've set the password, and that user model has been received, right? So the list has one user model. So the list size will be greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, that means this is a valid user. So I have to grant him some authority. So this is, I'm creating an object of type granted authority and I'm initializing it as a new simple granted authority. And this is the granted authority I'm giving. So this is nothing but a string called, what is the role? Role is system admin. Yeah. So once this is ready, this is the list called granted authorities list, right? So into this list, I will add granted authority, which is this. finally the list get of 0. List get of 0 is that user model for Roger, that Roger's object. That Roger's object also I call the setter method called set granted authorities, and I will pass this. And finally, I will return the list. Yeah. So finally, if you see, user model object is what gets returned. If everything is there, this will happen. But if the user itself is not present, I'm just going to return null. Guys, are you all with me? Yeah. So this is how this method is going to talk to the database, fetch the data. If the user is present, it will add the granted list, and finally the user model is returned. So anybody who's calling this OAuth-DAO method called get user details and they pass a username, finally they will get a user model. That is what is happening. Okay. So this is also ready. And once this is ready, next we will create a custom user detail service class. Because here, whatever method was there, finally that method called get user will get called from this custom user detail service class. This extends from one service class provided by Spring Security called user detail service. So this class is provided by Spring Security. So in this class, which is custom user detail, nothing great. We are going to call the DAO repository. So in step 4, we have created this DAO repository, and in this DAO repository, we have created a method which is going to return that user, right? So from this, we are going to call that method, which will finally give me the user model object. Yeah, that is what we will do in this service class. Yeah. So I will show you that service class. Don't worry. So this is my custom detail service class. Yeah. I want you to carefully look at this and then we will talk about it. Yeah. Go through it. Look at what it is doing. So this is the main service class. As you can see, this is the main service class. I'm calling it as custom detail service. And I'm implementing this interface called user detail service. I have auto-wired an object of OAuth-DAO, which we have discussed previously. This one, right? This is what is OAuth-DAO. So I've auto-wired for an object of type OAuth-DAO. Now in my method here, in my custom detail service, I have a method called load user by username. So this method can receive a username. So assume I'm passing a username called Roger. And initially a user model object is created called user entity and it is set to null. Now using OAuth-DAO, I'm calling the method called get user details and I'm passing the username as Roger. So it will go here. It will call this method called get user detail. It is passing Roger. If Roger is present, finally it should return the user model, right? So assume it returns that Roger's object. So that is what gets returned. Yeah. So whatever gets returned, I'm storing it in a user model object called user entity. Now, as we said, user entity directly cannot be used for any authentication. We have to wrap it as a custom user, right? Custom user class we have already created. So I am creating an object of new custom user, which is this. And to the custom users constructor, I am passing the user model. So you can see here, custom user, new custom user, and I pass this user model object called user entity. Yeah. Finally, I am returning the custom user. Yeah. So this will, if anybody calls this load user by username from this custom detail service, it will finally return the custom user. So all this I've put within try. If anything wrong happens, anything, the catch will catch hold of it and it will throw a exception saying user name not found exception. So this also you can see. Username not found exception is also available directly from Spring Security. So you can just create an object of, you can throw an object of username not found followed by which username was not found in the database. Yeah. So this is what you can do. This is an intermediate service. which is providing you a method called load user by username. When you pass a username, finally it will return a custom user object. That is what it is doing. Team, are you all with me? Yes. So we are almost ready. Code wise, implementation wise, almost all the classes are ready. The next two things is to discuss about your configurations. Yeah. So the next two classes that we are going to create will have configurational related setup. For example, in a security kind of app, yeah, don't you think so? You should have some encoding or crypting kind of mechanism so that your passwords or anything gets encrypted and decrypted accordingly. Yes, right. Plus, you might want to define one authentication manager. The authentication manager can decide how the authentication will happen. Yeah, all that related details I might have to configure. So the first configuration file we will now create, which will be a class-based configuration, is we will create a configuration class called security configuration. Here we will enable some beans and some settings for enabling web security. By default in your app, web security is not enabled. You have to do some kind of configuration so that web security gets enabled. So what we'll do is we will define in our app which will be the password encoder, because whenever the password is sent to you, maybe the password in the table is stored in an encrypted format. So you might have to have the appropriate encoder to decrypt it. So which one will be the encoder? In our program, we'll be using bcrypt password encoder for it. We'll also define the authentication manager. Yeah, all these. So this will be the security configuration class. And whenever you're creating security configuration class, you can extend web security configurer adapter, and you can override lot of methods here. Yeah. So this is our first configuration class, which will contain the web security related configuration. So let's look at this class, please. So you can see this is a typical configuration class. I've also used one annotation called enable web security so that your app enables web security. I can also use one annotation called enable global method security, and I can say pre and post enabled. So if somebody has written a pre and a post kind of aspects or advices, will that security setting be enabled even for pre and post methods? Option is true. So that also I do. Whenever I'm creating my own security configuration class, we have to extend from web security configurer adapter. So you can see here, web security configuration adapter is available from Spring Security. So that is what I am extending from. Once I extend, I can override lot of methods and I can specify how my program will behave and what configurations will my program contain. Yeah. Previously, in the previous step, we have created the service class, right? Called custom detail service. In the custom detail service, I have the load user by username, which is finally returning the custom user, right? So in this security configuration, I might use it. So I've auto wired an object of type custom detail service. Yeah. Next, are you able to make out in line number 25 to 28? I'm creating a bean entry and I'm creating an object of type bcrypt password encoder. Yeah. So in my program, I am going to use a password encoder. So for that, I have to create a bean of a particular type. So I'm creating an object of type bcrypt password encoder. So this is my password encoder. Yeah. So this is the bean entry. Plus in web security configurer adapter, depending on your need, you can override the methods. Yeah. So you can see I've overridden one method called configure. It will receive a authentication manager builder object. Using that object, I can specify which is my password encoder and which service will provide me, okay, which service will provide me the method to retrieve the user object. See, somebody should provide me the user object, right? So here you can see I have specified the password encoder as this, okay, encoder method. So if you call the encoder method, it will return a password encoder. That is what I've used. Similarly, I have used one method called user detail service, which is the user detail service which will provide you the method to get a user custom detail service. So you can see in custom detail service, we have implemented this interface called user detail service, and we have overridden this method called load user by username. That is what it will automatically call. So here is where I am setting the service, and here is where I am setting the encoder. So this service will provide me the user. This will provide me the encoder. Yeah. Similarly, there are more configurations I can put. For example, I can override one more method called configure, where I'm overriding the behavior of HTTP security. So in this method, I am going to say, look, whenever a HTTP request comes, all the requests should be authorized. Yeah, all the requests should be authorized. So any requests that are coming in trying to access any resource, they should be authorized. Plus they should be authenticated. And I have one more thing called session management. A new session should not be created. Yeah. So a new session should not be created. Session should already be there. So accordingly, I will have to set. Yeah. So I'm saying all the requests coming in for HTTP should be authorized and authenticated. And the session management setting is session creation policy is set to never. So session will not be newly created. The session should already be there when a user is planning to authorize and authenticate. Yeah. So such kind of HTTP related security settings also you can override. Yeah. Plus the basic authentication. See, usually once you enable web security, basic authentication will be available. But in my case, I want to ignore the basic authentication because my OAuth will take care of the authentication now, right? I don't want the regular web security to come in between. So that I'm ignoring. So web security, I'm ignoring. Yeah. Plus the last one is my authentication manager. Yeah. So in my authentication manager, because we are anyway using OAuth, I will just use the regular OAuth authentication manager bean, which will automatically take care of all the authentication. Guys, are you all with me? Yeah. These are the configurations that I have to keep it ready so that your entire thing works well. These are security, general security related configuration that is available in this class called security configuration. Yeah. Very similar to this, we will have to do the second set of configuration. And this is the configuration class called OAuth-config. I'm sure by looking at the name of it called OAuth-config, are you able to make out that this config class will contain OAuth2 related configuration details, right? Yeah. Like what is the client ID? What is the client secret? Yeah. The private key, the public key. Yeah. What will be the validity of the token? What will be the scope of the token? All those details pertaining to OAuth2 will be there in this configuration file. Yeah. Please note, security configuration has the basic overall security settings. What will be the encoder? Which one will provide me the user details and all that. But OAuth2 config will be the resource, is the validation part. See, the security configuration is more the authentication part, yeah, which is authorization part, which is basically taking care of user and the encoder, etc. But OAuth2 config will contain more details on the OAuth2 related settings like client ID, client secret, JWT token converter, which one to use, which is the private key, what is the public key, what is the token's validity, what scopes it should allow. All those details will be available in OAuth2 config. Yeah. So scope is nothing but whether I'm going to allow this person to perform both read and write activity, or read, write and update activity, or read, write, update and delete activity. All that I can decide. That is nothing but the scope. Yeah. So such things will be there in the OAuth2 config. Yeah. So let me show you OAuth-config. So before the tea break, we will complete this OAuth-config and then we can take a break. Yeah. Okay, have a look. This is the initial part of my OAuth-config class. So whenever you're creating your own OAuth-config, you can extend from authorization server configurer adapter. So here is where I am kind of configuring how your authorization server and your resource server should behave. So they will require many details, right? That detail is what I'm giving. Yeah. Now in our example, in the bank example I was giving you, can you tell me who is the client, guys? Who is the client? The user is me. Who is the client? Yeah, correct. Client is my father, right? Client is my father. So you can see here, look at line number 18 and 19. Are you able to make out two properties I've created? Client ID and client secret. Yeah, client secret is like a password. So what is the ID of my father? Wipro. What is the client secret? What is the password? Super secret. Yeah. Plus, can you see there is one property that I've created called private key? Yeah. And here entire thing is the private key. Private key is that key that I carry, right? Which I have. So to open my locker, I have one key, right? That is the private key. Yeah. So I have a string called private key where I have kept my private key ready. How to generate this private key, we will discuss next. Don't worry. Yeah. One long big private key. Similarly, this is the public key. You remember in public key is the key that the bank has. Yeah. And the clerk uses it, right? I open the locker with private key. He will open the same locker with his public key. Only when both the keys are used, the locker gets opened. So that is the public key. Yeah. And so these details are available initially. Plus, I'm sure you can guess. Yeah. So here I've auto-wired an object of type authentication manager. Yeah. Plus, I've created a bean entries, many bean entries here. Yeah. In the first bean entry from 62 to 68, can you see that I am creating a bean entry for an object of type JWT access token converter? Yeah. See, somebody should generate the token, right? So to who is server? For authorization server to generate the token, just to generate the token, they will require two things, private key and public key. So here, and finally, we will be able to generate that access token converter. So here you can see, this is the token enhancer method, which is returning JWT access token converter. So I'm creating an object of JWT access token converter. And to this converter object, I'm setting the signing key. Signing key is what the user uses. That is nothing but the private key. And again, I'm setting the verifier key. Verifier key is the clerk, is the bank clerk. So that is the public key. Yeah. So these two are done. And finally, the converter is ready. So now I've kept the JWT access token converter ready. Similarly, there's something called as a token store. Which is the token store? After I generate that token, I have to store it in one token, right? So the token is called as token store, which is the token store. So I'm just returning a new object of JWT token store. Whatever token enhancer I've created earlier, this method is going to return a JWT token converter, right? Which will contain the private key and public key. Using that, it will be able to create a JWT token store. So that is also ready. Yeah. Next, there is a method called configure. In the configure method, I have to specify which is my token enhancer and which is my token store. Yeah, and which is my authentication manager. So I'll say authentication manager is authentication manager, which I've auto-wired here. Okay. Plus, which is my token store. Token store method will return the token store. So I provide that method. Which is your token converter. Token enhancer is my token converter. So I provide that. Yeah. So all the data is ready. Plus, next few configuration. Look at this configuration of my authorization. Here I'm using token key access, and I'm saying permit all, check token access only if it is authenticated. That means what? Whenever somebody accesses any endpoint, yes, I'm permitting all the methods. People can access all the methods. But when they access the method, they have to be authenticated. Only if they are authenticated by the client ID, by the password or the client secret, plus their private key and public key combination, which is a token. Only when they are authenticated, I will be able to allow them to access. So that is this setup. Yeah. And look at the last setup. Another configure where I'm configuring the service configurer. Yeah. Have a look. Can you look at this and tell me which will act as the client ID? Which property will act as the client ID? Client ID. Yeah. Which property will act as my secret or password? Client secret. Yeah. So it will take this client ID and this is the client password. Yeah. Secret, right? So it will take that. Plus, I am going to allow what operations to be performed. This client, what operations can he or she perform? Right, read and write. Yeah, but it depends on that method. If that method is allowing only get method, get access, or if that method is allowing only post access, again it will work or not work accordingly. But the scope is read and write. Yeah. And what is the authorization grant types? Yeah, I will provide the bearer token or the password. I will also share a refresh token plus whatever token that we have sent. It will be valid for 20,000 seconds. Can you see that, guys? Whatever token gets generated, that will be valid for 20,000 seconds. And the refresh token also. Assume the user for whatever reason refreshes the call, and in the refresh also there will be one refresh token that they can use. That refresh token validity also will be for 20,000 seconds. Guys, are you all with me? Yeah. So here I have in token enhancer, I have given private key and public key. In my client details server configurer, I have given my client ID and client secret and the scope. Yeah. So these are the two important configuration classes. Yeah. Team, are you all with me? Yeah. I know that it is, are you able to make out that this is a lengthy program? There are many things that we have done, but we have understood that each step or each class, what is the role that is played, isn't it? Yeah. Now that we have completed almost all the classes here, so we started our journey by understanding the Spring Security application, yeah, which has my which is acting as my authorization server and resource server. Plus in this, I also have the REST controller, plus my user model, which will have my properties, username, password, and granted authority. Yeah. Plus I also have custom user, because when working with the Spring security, you have to represent a user as custom user. So I have a custom user which extends from user, which will wrap your user model as a custom user, right? Plus after that we have our OAuth, okay, OAuth DAO, which will access the table and get the user details. Plus I also have a custom details service, yeah, which will finally have a method called load user by username, which will provide you the custom user object. And just now we have looked at two security configuration classes, where I have configured the general security plus OAuth2 security. Yeah. So almost all the classes are ready. Team, are you all with me? Yeah. But there are few more steps that are pending. So, but this is the right time for us to take a break. Yeah. We will take a break. Once we come back, there are few more topics pending. Like, guys, you saw this, right? See, in OAuth2, you saw the private key and the public key, right? Are you able to make out that this is one huge big encrypted private key and one huge big encrypted public key? Yeah. But how do I generate this? There should be some way to generate this, right? And even for table, in the table also, when we are storing the user details, password also should be encrypted. Yeah, because we are planning to use, according to our security configuration, we are planning to use the bcrypt password encoder. So our password also should be stored in a bcrypt format so that the encoder can encode it. All these steps are pending. And finally, I will also have to create SQL files for creating the table and inserting some data and all, right? All that we will do. And once that is ready, then we can make the request and see whether things are working fine. Is that okay, all of you? Yes. So this is the right time for us to take a break. We'll take a break of 15 minutes, come back at 11:30 and we'll resume. Welcome back. Before the break, we have completed the main application functionality implementation discussion of the Spring Security app, right? So all that is completed. There are last few settings that we need to complete, and then we can run this app and test whether the functionalities are working fine. Yeah. So under that first discussion, we will look at how you can generate the private and public key that is required for the above configuration classes. So if you recollect, here in our class, which is the OAuth-to-config, we have used two properties, right? A private key and a public key. And here you can see I have provided this entire private key here. And similarly, we have provided the public key. But how do you generate this private key and public key? Yeah, that is something that we need to understand. So to generate this private and public key, you will require to use a tool called as OpenSSL. So using OpenSSL tool, which is a command line tool, you can create a private key and a public key. It's very easy. In fact, uh, I also conduct trainings on one analytical tool called Splunk. So OpenSSL as a tool was available to me through Splunk itself. For example, let me show you. Here, if I say where OpenSSL, can you see this OpenSSL exe is part of my Splunk installation? Yeah. So I was able to directly use this OpenSSL and I could generate the private and public key. But in case you don't have it on your machine, you can download it. For example, please visit the OpenSSL website, the download section. So this is OpenSSL. So you can see this is the OpenSSL. OpenSSL provides you cryptography and SSL and TLS toolkit. This project develops and maintains OpenSSL software, which is a robust commercial grade. It is open source, but it is commercial grade, full feature toolkit and for general purpose cryptography and secure communication. So this tool can be used to create a private and a public key. So in the download section, there are various options for you to download. Yeah. So you can download either as a tar file or a gz file. Okay, all those. Yeah. So you can also visit the download section. Okay, and then download it. Yeah. Once you download and install it on your machine, you can start using this OpenSSL. Yeah. So OpenSSL command to generate a private key looks like this. OpenSSL gen RSA -out jwt.pem and this 02048. And once you do this, you just again have to say OpenSSL RSA-in jwt.pem. So this is the set of commands for generating a private key. So once you get the private key, copy that entire private key. Okay. So 1 minute. Let me try to run this commands. Yeah. So OpenSSL gen RSA -out jwt.pem, sorry, okay, 2048. Yeah. So you can see that, okay, it it says can't open some configuration file. That is okay. Once this is ready, you can run the next command. Okay. So it's a open SSL RSA -in jwt.pem. Yeah. So can you see this private key got generated, all of you? Yeah. So this entire private key from this line, one common mistake that people will do is they will ignore those first two lines and only the code they will copy. No, private key is this entire thing. From this to this entire thing is the private key. Yeah. So just copy that, put it into a notepad. Okay. So this will be your private key. Yeah? So you can see here, private key or public key should start from like this till here. Okay. So this is the private key. So similarly, you can generate the public key. Again, there's a set of commands to generate the public key. Open SSL RSA and in JWT-pen pub out. So this will generate the public key. Copy the public key also. Yeah. So this is private key and public key. Guys, are you all with me? Now, once the private key or public key is there, you will update your configuration file accordingly, right? Now, if you are using Spring Boot later than 1.5 release, you also need to add one property in your application.properties file to define the OAuth2 resource filter order. Because you are using OAuth2, Spring Security also has internally few authentication filters that are there. So because you are using OAuth2, you have to set the OAuth2 resource filter order as 3. So this is if you are using version Spring Boot later than 1.5. So in our case, yes, we are using version greater than 1.5. So obviously you will have to put this property, security OAuth resource filter order, set it to 3. Yeah. And here in previous created public key and private key, you should update it in your OAuth2 config class in the private key and public key properties. Team, are you all with me? Yeah. So that is what I've already done, right? So in case you see here, in my class, OAuth2 config, private key and public key, I have already updated. Yeah. Now, if you just go to your properties file, application.properties file. In my example, my server port, I've changed it as 809390, and this is the property. Security authority OAuth2 resource filter order, I'm setting it to 3. Yeah. So what I've done is, if you want to learn a little more on this resource filter, in the notes page, I will anyway share this PPT with all of you today. You can see in the notes page, I've given some extra learning about what is this resource filter. Okay, how do you know more about it? Okay, all that I've given some details here. In case you want to go through, you can go through it. Yeah. So this is also ready now. And finally, in our case, you remember the DAO class is running the SQL query to fetch the data from a user table. And from there, it will fetch the username, password, and all that, right? So the next step for us is to create the corresponding schema.sql file and data.sql file. And I will store it directly under my SRC main resources folder. Whenever your app runs, if there are any .sql files present under your SRC main resources folder, first it will check whether schema.sql is there. If schema.sql is there, it will run it first. After that, it will check whether you have any data.sql and it will run it next. So in my case, we will create the schema.sql and data.sql. And the default database that we have added in our dependency is H2 database. Yeah. So automatically it will create the table and the corresponding data will get inserted into it. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some sample records into it. Yeah. So let me show you how we have done that. Yeah. So you can see under SRC main resources, I've created schema.sql and data.sql, right? So let me show you schema.sql. Have a look. Go through the SQL query, the DDL query, please. DDL. What is the table name I'm creating here? Users, right? And how many columns are there in this? How many columns are there in this table? 3 columns. ID, which is an integer type primary key, which internally is used. But for us, what is important is username, which is varchar of 45, and password, which is varchar of 60. Yeah. So the table called users will get created. Yeah. Then what do I have in data.sql? Have a look. Go through it, please, all of you. Go through it and tell me what am I trying to do here? I'm inserting 2 sample records into that users table, right, guys? Yes, right. So you can see I insert into users ID. I'm just giving as 1. Username I'm giving as Steve, and password I'm giving this. But are you able to make out that this is not a string kind of password? It is a password in a encrypted format. Are you able to make out? Yes, right. Similarly, I'm inserting another record and one more user called Roger. And this is also again one more encrypted password. What is this? How have I created it? Have a look. Please note the password should be stored in the format of bcrypt encoder in the database. Because in our example also, we are using a bcrypt encoder. When it checks the table, when it fetches the password, when it needs to validate, it will be using a bcrypt encoder. So whenever you're storing the data in the database also, you have to store it in a bcrypt encrypted format. So very easy. There is an online tool available which can help you to create a bcrypt password or a bcrypt code for your password. Yeah. So this is the tool. For example, here, just use this. It's an online tool. Any password of yours, it will just give you the bcrypt encoded value of it. So for example, assume in my case for the user called Roger. So you can see here, right? For the user called Roger, assume I want to have the password as Bangalore, all in lowercase. So, but for the Bangalore password, this is the corresponding encrypted format. So you can see here, password, I'm just going to enter Bangalore. And this is a bcrypt password generator. So enter your original password. My original password is Bangalore, all in lowercase. And when I click on this bcrypt, yeah, can you see it has created one bcrypt code here? Yeah. So copy that. Once you copy that, that is what you will use in your table. Okay. So for example, here in your table, this is the code that I've entered. Guys, can you all see that? Yeah. I'm just giving you an example. Whatever password we have created, okay, the original password, that is the password that you have to copy. So whatever is the password, that is what we will, whatever gets generated, we will copy it here. Team, are you all with me? Yes, okay. So use this online tool and generate that and just copy and paste it here. Okay. So that is how I have put this value. Are you all with me? And once everything is ready, we are now ready to save and build and run our app. Now, once we run our app, if somebody directly tries to access the endpoint, okay, without giving any credentials or any bearer token, etc., obviously it should fail, right? Now, ideally, if anybody wants to access the endpoint, first they have to get the bearer token. They have to query the authorization server, provide all the details, and authorization server will provide you the bearer token. Once the bearer token is available, finally they can make access to the actual resource. So it's like my father goes with all the credentials to the manager, who is the authorization server equivalent. From there, my dad will get the authorization token, which is also called as the bearer token. Once the bearer token is available, the bearer token will be supplied to the bank clerk, who will in turn allow my father to operate on the locker, right? So that is something that we will try. But first, let us run it. Okay, let us run the app, then we will follow these steps. Yeah? So I'm just going to come here. So almost all my code, everything is discussed. Now we can run this. So let me go and access this app. And in this app, we'll just run it as a Java application. So you can see the app has started, right? Now, once the app has started, let me do one thing. Let me try to directly in the browser. First, let us try in the browser. First, let me try to directly access 8090 and movie. Yeah? When I try to access it, yeah, look at what error it's giving me. It's saying it's giving me an OAuth error. Error is you are unauthorized. And what is the error description? Full authentication is required to access this resource. Because if you remember, in our config, we have said permit all of them are permitted, but is authenticated. The user should be authenticated and authorized, because I am not going to allow any Tom, Dick and Harry to access. Can you see it is failing for me, guys? Yes, right. So of course, you can also use Postman. I'm using a REST client called Postman tool. Let me go to Postman first. And in Postman also, let me try to make this access. Yeah. So now you know that whether you are going to access in Postman or elsewhere, anyway, it is going to fail, isn't it? Yeah. So here, assume I'm not giving any authorization or whatever. Yeah. It should fail. Yeah. But I'll do one thing. Okay. Just a minute, please. Yeah. So what we'll do is, anyway, it is going to fail. First and foremost step we are going to do is, we are going to follow these steps. Yeah. So we will test the application and try to access the endpoint. Anyway, we have seen that it fails. Now it knows that we are aware that it needs that bearer token and all the authorization token, right? So first task for us is, we have to generate the token through the authorization server. So how do you first generate the token? To generate the token, we will have to follow some steps. Yeah. So what is the step that I have to follow? Use this URL. This is your main app, and OAuth/token. So this is the URL. On this URL, try to make a post request. And in the post request, we have to provide some HTTP request headers. Like authorization will be basic auth, where you will supply the client ID and client secret. And the content type will be application form URL encoded. And the request parameters will be, grant type will be based on password. I will supply my username and password. Username will be Roger and the password is my original password. Not that bcrypt code. Bcrypt code is one big thing, right? You can't expect the end user to enter. But you will enter the original password. In my case, I had used Bangalore to generate, right? I will enter Bangalore, and once it validates, it should be able to, in case everything's fine, then it should give you a bearer token. Yeah. So first we will get the bearer token, yeah, by following these steps. So let's look at how we can do that. So to do that, OAuth OAuth / token, right? So I will say OAuth / token and I will make a post request on it. Yeah. And look at the headers, please. Yeah. First, I enable the authorization header. And here in the content type, I am setting the value as application form URL encoded. Are you all with me? Yeah. See, using headers, content type is this. Authorization, I've only enabled authorization. There'll be another tab for setting the authorization. So first in the header, enable authorization, plus in the content type HTTP header key, give the value as application form URL encoded. Yeah. And in the authorization, select the authorization as basic auth. Because we are now generating the token, bearer token. For generating the bearer token, I should select the authorization as basic auth. And here I have to supply the username and password. What is this username and password? Username and password that I need to supply for the basic auth is the client ID and client secret. So you remember this, guys? Client ID was what? Wipro. What was client secret? Super secret, right? These are the two things that I will pass. Are you all with me? So in authorization, you have to select basic auth. And in the values, you have to give username is Wipro and password is super secret. And you have specified that content type will be form URL encoded, right? And in the body tab, you have to give three more properties. Grant type will be password, because based on password, it will grant me the permissions. Username is Roger and password is Bangalore. So user details are here. User details is me, right? Assume I am Roger. My details will be here. So username is Roger and my password is Bangalore. This is the original password that I used to generate that bcrypt, and the grant type will be password. And in authorization, basic auth, this is my, in my example, this is my father's credentials, right? Username will be client ID. In my case, it is Wipro. Password will be the client secret, which is super secret. Yeah. So once all these things are given, click on send. Yeah. When you click on send, look at the output that you get. Yeah. Are you able to see that you have got something called as access token? Yes. And this is the bearer token. So token type is bearer token. It will also give you a refresh token in case the first attempts and all are wrong, and there is a timeout, and you will also get a refresh token. It expires in 20,000 seconds, right? So now it is another 19,999 seconds. Scope is with read and write, and this is the identity for it. Yeah. Now what is required for us is this bearer token, this access token. Yeah. So there is one option here to copy. Just click on this. So it will be copied to the clipboard. Now you can just copy it into one notepad for you. Yeah. We will need this bearer token. Yeah. Entire thing will be there, but we need this bearer token. So this entire value, this is the bearer token that we'll require. So just copy it, keep it ready. Now the next thing is you can access the movie endpoint, and here you can specify get. Yeah. But when you say get, in the header, it's okay. You can leave out all these. But in authorization, select the authorization now as bearer token. Yeah. And now in the bearer token, here it will allow me a space to give a token. Yeah. So for example, here, whatever we have copied, right? That is what I will copy here. Whatever is the latest thing. Yeah. So once I copy, so that means this is the URL. This is the get request, and headers and all you can remove, not a problem. But in authorization, I've selected bearer token, and now I will click on send. Yeah. So when I click on send, look at the output, all of you. Is it working? Yes, right. But if I don't pass the bearer token, assume I pass a wrong token, or I don't pass the bearer token at all. Let's see what happens. Yeah. See, I don't pass the bearer token at all. Very similar to what happened in the browser. See, you are unauthorized. Full authentication is required to access this resource. Yeah. And plus, remember, assume I give a wrong bearer token. Yeah. And I'll try to send. Yeah. So you can see it says invalid token cannot convert access token to JSON. Yeah. So it's an invalid token. Yeah. So only when I put the correct token, it will work. Are you all with me, guys? And even if I, for example, while generating the bearer token also, assume I have given wrong username or wrong password or wrong client ID and wrong client password, whatever bearer token I create, it will not be valid here. Yeah, that also will be wrong. Okay, that also will give errors. Only when everything falls in place, finally it is able to get this up and running. Are you all with me, guys? Yeah. So this is how you can play around with the authorization or OAuth2 kind of apps. Team, are you all with me? Okay. So now once, as we said in step 2, once you have the bearer token, you can access the resource. Yeah. Just select the authorization as bearer token and the resource should work and show you the actual date. Yeah. So this is how you have successfully set up your OAuth for your Spring Boot app. Team, are you all with me? Yes. But are you all curious why in my app, the latest version of Spring Boot is 2.7.0 and all, right? But if you recollect in my Spring Boot app of Spring Security, you remember I'm using one old version, 1.5.9 release. Yeah. Now, did you wonder why is Savita using a old version? Yeah. That is because of this slide. Yeah. Look at the first line, guys. Look at the first line. Authorization server support is discontinued in latest versions of Spring Boot. As an alternative, you can use another authorization server product called as Okta and use Auth2 resource server. See, your Spring Boot provides you resource server. You can also have a OAuth2 client for your client programs. But for resource for Auth server is not supported. So you will have to use Okta as your authorization server. Auth2 resource server is supported by Spring Boot. That combination you can use. But look at the problem with Okta also. Can you look at this? Yeah. For working with Okta as your authorization server, which versions of Spring Boot you should use? Greater than or equal to 2.1.2 release and less than 2.7.0-M1. Are you able to make out? Yeah. So in the latest versions, Okta also is no more supported. Please note there is lot of changes happening in Spring Boot in terms of whether it has to support authorization server or not. So the other alternative. So here is one tutorial where Spring Boot security with Okta is introduced. But unfortunately, this also is no more supported greater than 2.7.0 onwards, right? Yeah. So another alternative is you have some tools, other products called Glue. There is another product called Keycloak. All these are examples of external authorization server. So you can use these products. GLUU. Glue is one alternative product for authorization server. And you also have something called Keycloak. These are the other two options that are available. Yeah. But very recently, in March of 2022, we also saw that there is an authorization server that is introduced and it is available. So what I've done is I have provided these links in the notes page. Yeah. So Spring Authorization Server 0.2.3 available, and there's a blog article on it. And there are also discussions on the authorization server being deprecated in Spring Boot. What are the alternatives and all that? There's a good Stack Overflow discussion. So whenever you have time, you can just go through it. Yeah. So anyway, it will be part of the PPT. I'll also share it in the chat window in case you guys want to have a quick look at it. Yeah. So I'm not too sure what kind of setup is available at UHG. They might be, if they are using an older version of Spring Boot, the authorization server might be still the same Spring Boot authorization server, or they might be using a third-party authorization server like Glue or Keycloak or anything else. The authorization server options are also provided from cloud vendors. So you could be using one of those cloud vendors to generate your bearer tokens. Yeah. So accordingly, the project can guide you. Guys, are you all with me? So I purposely listed all the steps that you have to follow to give you a fair idea of how the entire stuff works. Only change that would be is instead of having an inbuilt authorization server support, which was provided by Spring Boot, that will not be available anymore. Resource server will be there, which can validate, but generating the token, somebody else has to do. That part is no more supported in Spring Boot now. Yeah, but I've given you those links, right? Just go through it. There are some sample products that are there. Just go see whether that will be useful and try to learn from there. Is that okay, guys? So just to summarize, we looked at what is OAuth. We looked at what is authorization server, resource server, JWT tokens, and we have followed the steps to implement a OAuth-based security for your Spring Boot app. Yeah. I know it is a very lengthy module. There are too many steps, but I will give you the program that I have used for the demo. Anyway, these sessions are getting recorded. Whenever you want, you can replay it and understand how the flow happens. All that you can do. Is that okay, guys? Yeah. So please remember, guys, I will also, now that we are finishing microservices, all of you are also supposed to take up a quick assessment. You all remember that for Spring Boot also, as Gayatri has guided you, you all took up a quick assessment in VLearn and the passing mark is 70. Yeah. Similarly, for microservices also, you have to take up a quick assessment and you have to finish taking up the quick assessment by 3 p.m. today. So I will give you the details of how and where you can access, complete it, and then you have to give me an update in the MS team. So in the MS team, I will put a message and I want all of you to reply to that saying you have completed. Is that okay? Yeah. No need to share any score. Minimum passing score is 70. You just, if you get 70 and above, just put a message done and completed. Yeah, I want all of you to complete it before 3 p.m. today and give me an update, guys. Yeah, but before that, shall we finish one last theoretical module on the concept called as CSRF attacks? Yeah. Yes, Sujit, you can attempt multiple times. I think 3 times or something it will allow. Yeah. So in case you don't get passing mark in the first attempt, you can attempt it multiple times. Yeah. So this is the CSRF attack. Okay. This. Okay. So before opening this, I'm opening the forum for Q&A. Yeah. Go ahead, please. Shubhadeep.
Uh, so generally, I mean, the authorization server would be one. I mean, in case I have like a number of services running, say Cafe Info and the other services. So for that, authorization server will be one, and these will be treated as resource servers, right?
Correct. Correct.
So and also you have, I mean, there was a self-learn for the service gateway. So is it like it would be added to the service gateway in, I mean, for to cover all the resources, or in the
Correct.
individual microservices, in resources we will keep this, I mean, the resource server part.
The service gateway is usually will act as the starting point to the entire backend of other microservices and other resources. So that will remain the same, Shubhadeep. Yeah. So you can imagine your service gateway or your API gateway as
Hmm.
your as your main door, and behind that you will have rest of the microservices, rest of your projects like Eureka or your OAuth or any other thing. Yeah. So your API gateway will still come first.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Guys, now that you have learned so many things, are you able to make out why we said microservices? One of the drawbacks of microservice is complex. You all remember? Yeah. One of the drawbacks of microservice, we said it is complex. Yeah, because you might require to set up all these things in a production environment if you want this entire thing to work smoothly. Yeah, see, in our example or in the lab exercise, we have set up only three things. Yeah, which is your Eureka, your load balancer, and your circuit breaker. Now you have learned all additional topics. Now if you have to implement everything, you can imagine the enormity and complexity of it. Yeah, so that is why we said it is complex, and it is not that for every simple requirement of a distributed app microservices architecture needs to be used. May not be. Yeah, but this is how the microservice architecture works and works well. Yeah. But you can get clarity only when you set up things. Only when you get your hands dirty, you will get to know where you are falling, where is it broken, and all that stuff. Okay, I highly recommend you guys. Though in the lab, we are not asking you to implement all advanced things. Whenever you get time, please start working on it. See how things work. See how the entire flow works. It will be a good learning for you guys. Is that okay? So shall we complete the last module before we close and I give you the details of the quick assessment, please? So we will share the screen. This is the last discussion on something called as CSRF attacks. This topic might not be, is a general topic. It might be valid for a simple Spring Boot app. It might be valid for your regular microservices. All that it is valid. Even for a regular web application also, the CSRF attack and related configurations might be valid. Yeah. So this is going to be a theory chapter. I'm just going to show you some steps. If at all you want to use it in your apps, you can go ahead and use it. Yeah. So first let us understand what do you mean by CSRF attack and how you can avoid it in Spring Boot apps. Yeah. So these are the objectives that I will try to cover. We will look at what do you mean by CSRF attack. There's something called as a CSRF token. And what are some of the steps that you can follow to enable CSRF in your Spring Boot security? There might be a valid and legitimate reason why you might want to disable CSRF in Spring Boot security. We'll also look at steps to disable CSRF in case you want. Yeah? So first and foremost, we'll have to look at what is CSRF. CSRF has a full form. It stands for cross-site request forgery. This is a form of attack, yeah, which executes unwanted calls on a web application without intervention of the end user, or some kind of malicious, with some kind of malicious intent, you are forcing the end user to execute some kind of calls that internally might corrupt the data, or it might do some unwanted kind of tasks. All that is called as a CSRF attack. Yeah. So this CSRF attack forces the end user to make some unwanted calls to the web application servers, where the authentication is valid. The user is a valid user. The user is a valid user. The user is working with the app. But while working with the app, you are maliciously forcing the user to perform some unwanted kind of activities, due to which some unwanted things happen. Okay, that is called as a CSRF attack. So how when me and you are creating web applications, and obviously we are throwing this web application to the public, and there are a lot of users who are going to access it, and there are a lot of hackers also who are trying to do some malicious activities. You have to be a little careful about it. How? First, before I show you what are the steps to enable CSRF control, let us look at some examples of CSRF attacks. Yeah, one is a legitimate. The first one you see is a legitimate actual task. For example, assume the client is making a GET request on this URL. Now look at this. So assume me, I am planning to transfer some 100 rupees to one of my friend. So when I'm using my bank app to transfer it to my friend, you can see, look at the URL, bank.com. I'm transferring to the account number 1234. So this is my friend's account number. And what is the amount that I'm transferring, guys? What is the amount I'm transferring? 100. Yeah, I'm transferring 100. This is my original requirement. Yeah, but look at the malicious one. This is a malicious, same thing. Instead of this, this is the URL that they are using. Can you look at this? Is this my friend's account number in the second URL? No, this is a different account number, and look at the amount. It is transferring 1000 rupees. Yeah, but how can this be triggered? Yeah, how can this be triggered? There are various ways of how it can be triggered. Yeah, one such case is this. So what they can do is they can show you a link. Yeah, they can arbitrarily show you a link. Okay, maybe some ad, some link they can show you. So like this, the link like this, show cute puppies. So assume I am a dog lover. I like these cute puppies. I don't mind seeing some picture of cute puppies. So what I do is, I don't think this is any malicious thing. I just click on this link. But can you see how this link has been created? This is a hyperlink. And look at the hyperlink. The hyperlink href is, it is generating, or it is making a request of transfer to that hacking guy's account, and the amount is so on. You're already a validated user in your bank app, and you click on one malicious link like this, and your transfer happens. Yep. And you know what? This is, you're still forcing the user to click. But look at this, guys. You need not even force the user to click. Look at this. I'm showing some image on your website. Can you see the source of that image? This one. Yeah. Look at this. This is the source of the image. The user need not even click. The source of the image itself is this malicious URL. Yeah. Or you can even do it through a post request. Look at this post request. Assume I'm asking you a form. Yeah. The form looks very legitimate. But can you see any hidden input here? Yeah. Yes, right. There are two hidden inputs. I am not able to see that at all. But there is a hidden input where account number is changed to 4321 and the amount is being changed to 1000. Yeah. And when you submit this form, the data goes through and it transfers this amount to this unknown account. Yeah. So there are a lot of such CSRF attacks that is possible. Me and you can do only one thing. We can secure our web applications. So when we are designing our web applications, we should ensure that such kind of CSRF attacks don't take place. How? That can be easily done by enabling a CSRF token. So a CSRF token is a very unique, secret and unpredictable value which will be created by the server-side application, and it will be transmitted to the client for subsequent HTTP request made by the client application. Very similar to the concept of cookies. I'm sure all of you are aware of state management using cookies concept, right? In servlets and JSP we have learned, right? Same funda, but this will be a CSRF token and which will be very unique, where it will be secretive, unpredictable value will be there, and it will be created by the server side app, and it will be transmitted to the client first time, maybe right after logging in. Subsequent HTTP requests made by that client application, the same CSRF token should be sent. Yeah. So the server side application, apart from validating your data or cookie, it will also validate CSRF token if it is enabled. Yeah. In the subsequent request, it will see whether your CSRF token is correct. It will reject the request if the token is missing or if it is invalid. So CSRF tokens are very strong. It is unpredictable. Okay, very generated as session tokens with properties that the attacker cannot predict or determine. Yeah? So that way you can safeguard it. So how do you enable CSRF? Yeah. So one is, there are 3 steps that you can follow. Yeah. In fact, look at the second step. If you have added Spring Boot security module in your app and you are using any of the Spring Boot security modules like basic auth or maybe OAuth or whatever, by default, the security module enables CSRF by default. You need not specifically do anything. But recommended is, in case you are not using any security module, you want to enable CSRF, there are some steps that you can follow. One is, in your views, you can add Spring Security Taglib, and you can add the CSRF token in your JSP file or your template files. For whatever reason, in case CSRF was disabled, you will remove that CSRF disabled code so it becomes enabled for you. Yeah. So how? Look at this. If you want to use the CSRF tags, tokens or tags, first and foremost, you have to add the Spring Security Taglibs dependency. So in your app, you can add the Spring Security Taglibs. And once that is done, in your JSP file or in any of your template files, can you see that here it's an example of JSP using the taglib directive. I have added a taglib or a tag library which is Spring Framework Security Tags, which can be accessed by this prefix called SEC. Now in your welcome page or your form or wherever, can you see how I have enabled CSRF here? Yeah, using this prefix called SEC, apart from rest of the things, I have clearly enabled CSRF input. That means whenever this form gets submitted, apart from rest of the things, CSRF code or CSRF token also should be sent. This will be automatically managed. But anybody who is maliciously making a request, anybody who is maliciously trying to attack, they will not have this token, right? The token will be created by the server and it will be stored in the server, very similar to cookies concept, but more similar to session. It will be stored on the server so that next time the request comes in, along with rest of the data, CSRF input also should be sent, which other clients will not know. So they will not be able to understand what is this and it will fail for them. Yeah. So this is how you can enable CSRF token. So CSRF token must be included in all your post forms in your JSP or your template files. Whenever this form is submitted, the expectation is the server will expect CSRF input also to be provided. This is one way of doing it. Yeah. Another way is, of course, one, you will add this, then you will enable this. This is one way. Another way is, see, one is you will have to add the taglib step. This is step 1. Step 2 is add this input. Okay. Step 3 is, in case, if CSRF is disabled in your app for whatever reason, enable it. Yeah. See, there are valid, legitimate reasons why CSRF might have disabled. But if you want to enable it, look at your code. So this is one security configuration class. In my security configuration class, where I have configured the security for my HTTP, all these are there. But can you see? I have a code where I have disabled CSRF. But if you are wanting, don't disable it. So I have a code where I've disabled it. Remove this line so that your CSRF gets enabled. Yeah. This is how you can play around with it. Okay. As I told you, enabling CSRF, yes, it is required to ensure security and all that. But assume you have a non-confidential kind of site. Not all Spring Boot applications are very confidential. Not all data is confidential. Yeah? But the reason to disable CSRF might be many. Maybe you are creating a public app. It is open to public. Yeah, and the data is not very confidential or very secure data. Or during development stage or during testing phase, temporarily you want to disable it so that it does not become cumbersome. Of course, you can disable it by overriding your configure method, and in your configure method, if you want to disable CSRF, you can say http.csrf disable. But this is a good choice if you have a valid reason. For example, you are still in development phase and testing phase, you do this. When you are ready to deploy it in production environment, comment this off so that CSRF gets enabled. Yeah. Or your Spring Boot app is a public app, no confidential things are involved, then it's okay that you disable CSRF. Okay, that is okay. Team, are you all with me? Okay. Just remember these points. I don't have a specific program for it. Any program, you can use it. Yeah? And of course, see here, you are doing it for a specific app or a specific configuration. This is one way. What you can also do is you can even disable this even in your application.properties file. Security.enable.csrf. As I told you, Spring Security by default will enable CSRF. But if you want to disable it in your app, in your application.property, you can use security.enable.csrf. You can set it to false. So it depends on what kind of apps you are creating, what kind of security you want, whether you want CSRF to be stopped, okay, or it's okay, all that you can specify. Yeah. So that is the module. Yeah. So nothing great. This is not any module where I have a demo program. This is the concept I want you to know. And whenever you want, please enable it or disable it according to your needs. Yeah. So just to summarize, we saw what is CSRF attack, what is the CSRF token, steps to enable it, steps to disable it, all that we have spoken. Yeah. The last part of our training is you will have to take up a quick assessment. Please remember the quick assessment does not include advanced topics. So the advanced topics that we talked about, like yeah, log tracing with Sleuth and Zipkin, then CORS, yeah, then just now we discussed about OAuth, yeah, or CSRF, or whatever e-learning, self-learning I've given you. Okay, it does not involve all the advanced topics. The assessment or the quick assessment is on the basic topics that we have learned. Basic microservices, yeah, the Eureka, load balancer, circuit breaker. These are the main topics that the assessment will be on. And it is quite easy to get 70% marks. That's the minimum score if you were good in all the basic modules. Are you all with me? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the details of the quick assessment. Give me a minute. So first you can go to your VLearn. Okay, I'll give you these details. I'll post these details in the MS team. Don't worry. So first you will access your VLearn. And here you will search for, using the search, you will search for a learning path. Yeah. LP-439. Yeah. Let me see whether it's correct. So 1 minute, I'll just paste this here. So access this URL, and once you are in the main screen, search for this. Yeah, and when you search for this, you will get this learning path, Java microservices with Spring Boot, right? So here there are 3 dots. Here there will be an option for register. You can register for it. Don't worry, we are not expecting you to register and complete the entire learning path. Anyway, you guys have learned with us, right? But if there is a register, please register for all the components. And in my case, I've already registered. So if I just click on it, you will be able to see the learning path. Yeah. So in the learning path, you will have all the learning content. For us, not needed because all this we have already completed. But just go to the assessment part. In the assessment part, yeah, in my case, I've already attempted it because we have created it and we wanted to test. That's why I've attempted it already. But in your case, once you have registered, everything is completed. For this assessment, you will have a start button once you have registered correctly. Yeah. So you will have a start button here. In my case, I've already done. But in your case, you will have a start button once you have registered. Okay. Just click on that start button and you can start this assessment. Again, 20 questions, 20 marks. Yeah. And you can complete it easily. Yeah. So I will make this. Okay. Search for this LP. You will get the listing as technology Java microservices with Spring Boot. Yeah. Register for all its modules and then access the assessment and then complete the assessment. So okay, access the assessment and complete the assessment. Yeah. So I will post this in our MS team. Yeah. So in our MS team, our teams. Here UHG team. Below are the details of the quick assessment that you have to complete for microservices. Okay. Before 3 p.m. today. Okay. Before 3 p.m. today. Okay. So the details are this. Okay. So access this URL and search for this LP. Okay. You'll get this course. Register for this course and all its module. And then access the assessment. Okay. And then start and complete the assessment. Okay. So, and once this is ready, okay. Once you have completed, please reply to this message and give me a done message. Yeah. It's important that you complete it before 3 p.m. please. Yeah. Before 3 p.m. today. If you don't complete it, your data cannot be updated under training data. This is mandatory. So please complete it and then show me a done message. If you have scored 70% or higher. 70% is the minimum passing score. If you have not got 70%, again retry it. And once you get, you can just don't share any screenshots, nothing. Anyway, I will ask my team to pick it up from backend, but you just have to tell me whether it is done or not. Yeah. So this is very, very important. So I will expect each one of you to give me this thing or this update before 3 p.m. today. Is that okay, all of you? Yes, great. So I wanted to check with you guys. For last 2 days in the afternoon, I had given you 3 recordings. One was on API gateway, the other 2 was on Spring config server, right? Have you all completed all the 3 things? Yes. Have you also realized that I had also shared with you the demo programs that Saigita has used? That also I had shared. All of you have utilized that? Yes, right? So today what I will do is, I will again share few more recordings. If I'm right, I think you will have 2 recordings. Overall, less than 2 hours. Maybe one recording is of 1 hour and another recording is of some 10 minutes, if I'm right. Yeah. That will talk about caching. Okay. That will talk about caching. So I will share the caching related recordings also. And I want you to go through the caching related records and in the afternoon. So in the afternoon, caching related e-learning, which will be done in self-learning mode. Plus, you will also have to finish the quick assessment of microservices. Cool, right? That's your afternoon plan. Right? Great. So what is the plan from, so if you guys finish all this, officially microservices is closed, right? And people who are yet to submit the microservices assessment, the hands-on, all of you should work on that also and submit. Okay. So I will also add that microservices hands-on on that assessment management. Okay. So till now I have got only 3 submissions, right? Ankit, Shubhadeep and Shrikant. These are the only 3 people who have submitted. Others, this also you have to do. Yeah. So from tomorrow onwards, what is the plan? Did you receive an invite from me? Yes. So you know the plan for Angular, right? Tomorrow and day after, that is 16th and 17th, you will have full day Angular, both in morning and afternoon, morning and afternoon. So I will be guiding you through that tomorrow and day after. On Monday to Friday, Geeta will be guiding you. She'll be continuing and you will have session only in the afternoon. Morning session has been kept free so that you guys can complete the hands-on whatever on Angular. Yeah. So me or Geeta, we will guide you what hands-on you have to do and accordingly you will start working on your hands-on. Yeah. So we are giving you the afternoon morning session free so that you can utilize that to do your hands-on. And the last day of our Angular training, you guys have to submit the hands-on. So something like that we should plan. Is that okay, all of you? Great. So that's it from me. I will be waiting for all your updates on these things by 3 p.m. And happy learning. Again, I'll meet you tomorrow. So tomorrow, both morning and afternoon session, you'll be with me for Angular.